in the Autonomous University of Barcelona. He is coordinator of the doctoral program in sport and health, psychology. He has a seat on the directive board of the Sport Research Institute and is member of the Research Ethics Committee in the UAB. Professor Torregrossa has been in the game for some years now. Back in the day, he was an advanced student of Professor Jaume Cruz, of whom he inherited an international and ambitious outlook for research, his highly rigorous academic standards, and what is even more important from where I stand, a profound devotion to training future researchers in the field of sport and exercise psychology to build a strong team around them. Following pioneering figures such as Natalia Stambulova, Dorothea Alferman, and Paul Willeman, he has developed his line of research in the field of career transitions, taking both a social and cognitivistic approach to the study of athletic careers, where he has developed a solid and fruitful trajectory with back-to-back funded projects and grants for the last 20 years, most of them internationals, including calls such as Erasmus Plus Sport, Olympic Studies Center, or the European Commission 7th Framework Program. He has now more than 80 indexed publications with a total of 1.1 thousand citations in the Web of Science, reaching an age index of 20. And I'm pretty sure that for the sake of honesty and humility, he would also be glad if I presented you the number of rejected papers and unfunded grants as well. But Miquel, I'm afraid we are not tracking those anymore. When in the Managing Council of FEPSAC we were deciding the order of the speakers for this Congress, we agreed that for this last keynote we needed someone who could lift the audience in this moment of exhaustion. And as you will realize in a minute, Miquel is the best suited to achieve this. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Professor Miquel Torregrossa.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. The very last keynote of the conference, the very last day. We are all tired. Thank you very much, Iago, for this nice presentation. Thank you to the Managing Council for inviting me for this keynote. I'm not so sure of thanking you for leaving me for the last day, but okay. It is an honor to be invited as keynote speaker in this conference, especially considering that I've never been invited to a Spanish conference as a keynote speaker. But this is not because of political reasons. This is because I'm a Catalan. This is because I'm still too young. Okay. So thank you, FEPSAC, for betting on new promises like me and inviting me to do this final keynote. Voglio anche ringraziare ovviamente il comitato locale, tutti gli italiani, tutto questo staff che lavora qui in questo congresso, l'hanno fatto meraviglioso. Grazie tante perché il congresso è stato fantastico e il lavoro di tutti voi è stato molto importante perché diventasse così fantastico. And now, I'm going to start. The title of my speech is Rethinking and Spreading Career Transition Research. And I'm the author, Miquel Torregrossa. Iago already introduced me. And I also sign it with my team, my research team at the UAB, the JEPA team. I will try to do both things, rethink how we have been working on career transition research during the last 25 years, and trying to spread the concepts and classifications in order to be able to work with more transitions and more athletes, coaches, and other agents involved in sport. And as I was saying before, the authorship is not only me, it's all the research group, beginning by Iago. We are working together for many years, and he also mentioned my professor, mentor, and teacher, Jaume Cruz, who sadly passed away last year, and I want to dedicate this talk today to him as well. Because if I'm here today, it's because of his former work as well. I'm not joking when I'm saying that this is a teamwork and a team effort, and I learned it practicing my sport. This is my sport, this is human towers. A family activity that taught me many years ago that to achieve great constructions, as the one in the picture, you need many people working and pushing in the same direction. And something similar occurs to do scientific research in any field. Let me share with you the different contents of these talks in a non-totally ordered way. We will start with a short revisit of some of the concepts that we use in career transition, such as retirement, junior to senior transition, holistic view. We will also revisit some of the labels that we often use in the field, such as normative, non-normative, successful, unsuccessful. And we will also try to reflect on its implications. Then we will propose to spread the work on career transition research by classifying them as a function of its specificity and its predictability. And at different points of this conference, I will share with you some inspiring readings that guided and inspired our works. And of course, I will also share with you some of the results of our works in career transitions, classifying them in terms of specificity and predictability. And finally, I will share some concluding thoughts, especially on the use of the concept of successfulness versus the concept of adaptability when we analyze how people navigate through transitions. Let's start with a short visit of retirement. I wanted to cite this first paper published in English, at least the one I know, by Michovilovich in 1968. He published this paper in English, and it's from Yugoslavian soccer players, like the ones that the same year of the publication lost the final of the European Championship against Italy on the penalties. You might remember some of the people who was born in 1968, which was not my case, of course. I chose this quotation because it emphasized that the work should be done while they are still active. And he also emphasized the perspective view of introduce them to various kinds of activities while still active. Although most of you probably know, I would like to remark that if we go back to that days, the first years of studies in retirement, those studies tend to use gerontological and thanatological models to approach retirement. And the change to consider them as transitions was a very significant change. The first expansion of the field was adding the junior to senior transition as a second transition to study and to work with. One of the first junior to senior transitions studies that I read was the one published by Van den Avelle and colleagues in 2004. One of the colleagues is seated here in the first row. They evaluated career of 167 Belgian track and field athletes from 14 to 18 years old, who were age group national championships in different events 2 times. They evaluated right before the transition from junior to senior, and then 5 years later. Results show that only 70% of elite junior athletes made senior transition teams, 31 had staying careers, 28 performed irregularly with ups and downs, and 24% dropped out. So less of 20% of the best between the ages of 14 and 18 succeeded as elite athletes. After some years and several research and publications and applications also, in 2009, and led by Professor Natalia Stambulova and Professor Dorothy Alferman, who are also in the hall, the ISPP published a position stand on career development and transition of athletes. The paper ended with 6 statements and recommendations, and I'll summarize and share with you the first 3 ones. They say that career research confirms several normative and between brackets predictable athletic career transitions for which athletes can be prepared in advance. They also said that both career research and assistance models emphasize the importance of the holistic view of the athlete, that is a person who is doing sport but also other things in life. And they also said, that the transition from junior to senior is crucial for the athletes who want to reach the elite level in sport. In the holistic view of the athlete, the model of Willeman and colleagues in their different versions has guided an important proportion of the research conducted in career transition. You all probably know the model, and I'm not going to explain it in detail, only to highlight that it's developmental and from young ages to adulthood, and it sees the athlete holistically in different levels. And that we traditionally place the transitions in the different levels as the junior to senior transition or retirement in the sport level, and for example, the secondary to university transition in the academic and vocational level. They began in these levels, and then they expand to the others, but they are mainly from specific levels. The third statement of the ISP position stand said the junior to senior transition was crucial, and many scientists around the world started to do some research in junior to senior transition. Let me share with you some data on the junior transition in football, specifically. In 2015, Grossman and Lames published the results of some of the most talented football players competing in the under-17 Bundesliga in 2009 and 10. They follow up the same players 4 seasons later, and they found that 40% of them were in amateur competitions, and only 6% were in the Bundesliga or in the Bundesliga 2. In summary, less than 10% of the players signed a professional congress, and on the other hand, more than 20% had fully abandoned football. Let's go now to a follow-up study recently published by Dadgale and colleagues. They followed more than 500 players from the junior elite football academies in Scotland. And after 2 years, according to their own words, only 10% were successful and 19% were unsuccessful. They also highlighted a very interesting result: recruiting the youngest players does not increase their likelihood of becoming professionals, as we have seen in many other researches, but they still keep recruiting at early ages. As a part of José Mari López Chamorro PhD, and thanks to a scholarship by the FIFA with Tomás García Calvo, who is also here, we also evaluated almost 500 football players from under 23 teams in academies in Spain of the professional league in 2015, and tried to find them 5 seasons later in 2020. And we looked for the highest level reached, and we found very similar numbers that with the Germans and with the Scottish. Only 9% were playing professional in the Liga de Fútbol Profesional first or second division. And most of them were playing amateur football, second B, third or lower. 7% had dropped out, 3% were playing abroad. And I want to mention that what we asked to these players was, which is the highest level reached? And highest level reached does not mean established as a professional player, because 2 days ago, Barcelona played the first friendly match in this season. And probably some of the players that made the first team that they won't become professional with long careers. More recently, we also administered questionnaires to 500 youth soccer players of similar academies than in the former study. And we asked them what were their priorities at the moment of the administration. And you can see that 5% were dedicated only to soccer, and 39% were giving the highest priority to football. We also asked them prospectively, how do they picture themselves in 5 years? And in this case, 20% pictures themselves as being only centered in football, and 37% with soccer as a main priority. If we remember that the empirical data consistently report that at 10% of professionals from talented players at younger ages, it means that there is at least 47% of our sample that will be unsuccessful in the junior to senior transition. And this can have negative impact on their mental health. So these results lead the team to heavy discussions. We like to discuss, you know, we are Spanish and we discuss very often. And we asked 2 questions and we try to provide an answer. The first question would be, is it fair to define as successful only 10% that become professional players and label 90% as unsuccessful? Is it fair to label as normative a transition that only 10% of athletes navigate successfully? The answer to those questions is yes, if you evaluate the transition from a retrospective point of view, and not as much if you do it from a prospective point of view, and considering all athletes, both the ones that become elite and the ones that not. So our proposal today is to consider career transitions not only from a retrospective view, but also from a prospective one. And we want to recuperate that the word that Natalia and Dorothy and colleagues left in brackets, predictable, and integrate it with the holistic view from Paul and colleagues, and propose to classify the transitions based on specificity and predictability. In this classification, we will find predictable and level-specific transitions, predictable and holistic transitions, unpredictable and level-specific transitions, and predictable and Olympic transitions. And some of the examples in each category would be the junior to senior transition, or retirement in the sporting level in the predictable and specific, the secondary to university, fatherhood, or the fast track athlete to coach that it has been also discussed in this conference broadly. In the predictable and holistic, we can find transitions such as migration, transnationalism, or motherhood. In the unpredictable and level-specific, we will find transitions as the disruption of the Olympic cycle, an injury, or a divorce, for example. And in the unpredictable and holistic, we would find a lockdown, or a war, or also other kinds of injuries. Let me tell you how we built human towers and the relationship of human towers with this classification of career transitions. The basement of the tower is the beginning, as the predictable and level-specific transitions are the basement and the beginning of the study and application in career transitions. As the time for the conference is limited, and we are looking forward for the closing ceremony and the party afterwards, I will review one or two transitions for each category. In the predictable and specific level, I chose retirement because it was the first one and we're still working with it. And I will also review briefly the high school to university transition in the academic level. Let's go with retirement. The first we start to work with. Some of the many reasons that inspired our working on retirement were the conceptual model of adaptation to retirement by Taylor and Ogilvy. Also, the work by our colleague Sasa Sesicervich, that she should be here also, and Paul Willeman on the non-athletic factors on the sport career termination. And if you want to have a broad review of studies on retirement from sport, the one by Sanjay Park, David Lavalley, and David Todd was published in 2013. It was good. Now there is an opportunity for young scholars if they want to update it in 2023. Our first international paper was published in 2004, and it was a prospective view of elite athletes' image of retirement. When I read it now, to prepare this conference, I felt a bit embarrassed because 20 years later, I could write it in a very different way, of course. However, I think that we did two interesting things with that paper that were important for the applied work of the psychologists of our high-performance center with which we work in close collaboration. First, we marked that the prospective view are qualitatively different from the retrospective accounts, and both views are important to have a real image of what retirement is. And second, we also included the gradual formation of an image of retirement and what aspects should be considered in each stage. And as I mentioned before, this is very important for the applied work of psychologists with athletes. So, in 2015, we published the longitudinal study with the same athletes interviewed in the early 2000s, once again. And this time they were all already retired. We analyzed their experience related to the main factors that the scientific literature have proposed are relevant for easier retirements: planning, voluntary termination, multiple personal identities, availability of social support, and active coping strategies. What we found was that athletes that followed a dual career were best prepared for retirement, retired voluntarily, present a more balanced identity, perceived support from their environment, and used active coping strategies. On the other hand, athletes that followed a linear trajectory and were only centered in sport were worse prepared for retirement. It was a sport that left them, presented a unidimensional identity, perceived abandonment from their environment, and used passive coping strategies. Retirement from sport is not only a matter of finding a new job or new social relationship, it's also a matter of body transition and physical practice after sport. The body of an elite athletes need to adapt to the transitions as well, and we have studied these transitions both quantitatively and qualitatively, and I would like to briefly share results from two different researches. The first one is published in 2007 together with Yannick Stefan and my academic brother Xavi Sanchez, who is also here, probably. Yeah, here, okay. We studied a retired sample of French elite athletes, and we found that the difficulties experienced with the body predicted negatively the physical self-worth, and at the same time, this one predicts positively the global self-esteem, and with no influence at all of the nature of the retirement, the moment, or the reasons for that. So the body is very important as well in transition and when retiring from sport. We've been working applied with that as well, and now we have published recently a paper in Spanish in which, led by Anna Jordana, we have designed and implemented and evaluated an RIVT intervention to re-engage inactive former elite athletes in healthy physical activity. The point is that there is a gap between the intention and the behavior. Some of them have unrealistic goals and irrational beliefs regarding what sport and physical activity can be after retirement from sport. So we've been working with them in the conceptualization through the athletic career and how this influences the post-retirement lifestyle. The difference between being an elite athlete and stopping being one, realistic goals, work on the activities, the frequency, the intensity. You won't be able to have the national record anymore. And what we do with them is to propose to reinterpret the concept in healthier terms, flexible, and adapted to the vital moment. Predictable and level-specific transitions do not belong only to the athletic level. We can find them in other levels, such as the academic, vocational. We did some research on the transition from high school to university in the PhD of Andrea Perez, she's now working for Football Club Barcelona since she finished the PhD with us as a sports psychology and career provider as well. One of the papers was published in Spanish, and the title in English would be Female Elite Athletes Follow-Up of the Transition to University. Two main results from this paper. The first one is that the trajectories in the combination of sport and studies are not equal in male and female athletes in Spain. And for female athletes, the divergent trajectories in which they are forced to choose either sport or studies is more present than for male athletes. So female athletes are more forced to choose because they have less probabilities of combination. And the second one is, as it happens with all predictable transitions, is that we can prepare them in advance. And it's very important to promote this positive work in advance. Preparation in high school, and then when they are at university, 3 different phases of immersion, learning, and adaptation. Again, our applied psychologists use these models to advise females that are entering the university from the high performance center. Let's go now to the predictable and holistic transitions. In the tower, a second baseman is a still considerable amount of people holding. They are predictable moments, but with holistic view, as you must be attentive because you have to see what's going up and also what's going down. Actually, if you are curious, this is my position in the tower. I'm in the second level. Still, I'm young enough to climb there. The predictable and holistic transitions that can be planned in advance and affect all levels of the holistic model would be something similar. We have been working with migration and motherhood, and I will share some of our results with you. Let's start with athletic migration. If you ever want to work in athletic migration, read first the papers by Tatiana Riba and her colleagues. I would start with the acute cultural adaptation in female swimmers, and also very important, the model that together with Natalia Stambulova and Nora Ronkainen, they published recently. The other group that has worked in immigration is the Canadian group by Rob Schinke and colleagues. And they have very interesting papers on immigration from the point of view of the receiving countries. And last but not least, the inspiring readings are not always only subject-specific, and sometimes they are methodological. For our work on migration, the reading of Professor Brett Smith and Javier Monforte on stories and neomaterialism was also key. Our work on migration is mainly linked to the PhD of Luana Prato. She is actually a Colombian former synchro swimmer that developed her PhD in our team, and now she's back in Colombia working with Coldeportes to promote dual career programs. First thing we did was a systematic review and a meta-synthesis of the qualitative studies on cultural transitions and sport migration. And from this review, we extracted 3 main results. First, the need to study migration from the origin countries, emigration from the sending countries, not only from the receiving countries, because most of the research published is done from the perspective of the receiving countries. The need of producing transferable knowledge and work also in not only in English but also in Spanish. We have English. We are speaking all English here. I'm trying at least. But I think that we have to value the different languages and the importance of the different languages scientifically speaking. So we decided to work also in Spanish on that. And the importance of studying migration in female athletes, as most of the former studies were mainly with male athletes. So we started by doing life stories with 2 female Colombian cyclists emigrating to Europe. The title is We Are Climbers, both because Colombian cyclists are famous for being very good climbers, and because emigrating, being a female cyclist, is like climbing high mountains, such as the Mortirolo, the Pordoi, or l'Estelvio. We defined 4 main themes in the analysis of their life stories: the Olympic dream, facing the unknown, networks that support, and women and climbers. The Olympic dream was related to the reasons for migration. Facing the unknown was related to the fears and challenges that they found when they arrived to the places. For example, they arrived on the first day they had in the female Giro a team time trial, which they've never done before. The social support referred to the network that they had at home and they left at home. And the 4th theme, the athletic sexism, was also a very important one. One of the cyclists said, they call us with diminutives, they call us the little girls, the little ladies, and this is very annoying because we are athletes in every respect. So double climbing, double difficulty, one for being South American immigrant athlete and the second for being a female immigrant athlete. Luana also did a great job in her last paper of the PhD, and following our collaboration with Brett, we published a paper in Psychology of Sport and Exercise on assembling the sense of home in immigrant athletes. Based on a series of interviews with 7 Colombian immigrant athletes, we explored the relationship between the material world and the embodied narratives, both personal and sociocultural, regarding the process of assembling a new sense of home. The main ideas of the work are that immigrant athletes define home as a place of refuge where they can express emotions, they can behave and communicate in ways that they feel natural. During cultural transitions, these athletes need to assemble a sense of home in 2 environments, the house and the sports facilities. And the process of assembling a new sense of home in the destination country could be facilitated or hindered by architectural spaces, objects, food, technological devices, and sport materials. Here, I would like to share with you that this work was a migration for me as well. At least a trans-theoretical and transnational theoretical migration, because I don't consider myself a post-qualitative researcher at all. But when you have a team and people want to explore new routes and you have to supervise them, you go with them. And I have to say that it was a really interesting traveling. Let's go now briefly to motherhood. The works of Inés Ferrer. She was a former tennis player in which we had the opportunity to collaborate with Natalia Stambulova and with Marta Borrueco, also another member of the team. We interviewed current and former female tennis players, some of them mothers and some others no mothers, on the facilities and difficulties that they had to become mothers in the WTA Tour following the change in the rules that they promoted some years ago. The title asked if changing the rules was enough to promote motherhood, and according to these female athletes, changing the rules helps motherhood, but it's not enough. Managing both identities in the professional tour is very complicated, and it can only be done with as a team effort with the help of the family and support of the friends as well. Time now to move to the unpredictable part of the classification. Unpredictable implies less possibility of preparation. Although we know that this is possible, there is a possibility of preparation. And there is also a possibility of preparing for uncertainty. That is something that we have to start to begin to do after COVID and all these things. We will briefly speak about the disruption of the Olympic cycle, but there are others. And as I said before, as an unpredictable and holistic transitions, we can consider lockdown. We all went through lockdown, and it was a holistic experience, not only related to sport. And for example, war. Now, in the High Performance Center near to our university, we have a junior team of water polo from Ukraine, whose life has completely changed due to the war in Ukraine. And unpredictable and level-specific transitions, or the third part of the tower. It's a more unpredictable part. Balance is more unstable, and facing difficulties is more difficult. So it happens with this kind of specific transitions. It can be the Olympic cycle disruption, an injury, or a positive test of doping in athletic level, being fired from a job in the vocational level, or a divorce in personal life. We've been doing some applied research and counseling to Olympic and Paralympic athletes during the postponement of Tokyo 2020, Olympic and Paralympic Games, in a project funded by the Olympic Study Center of the International Olympic Committee, and led by Saúl Alcaraz and Rocío Zamora, two colleagues of us as well, who are not here, sadly. Regarding inspiring readings, this work by Constant and Wilhelm was crucial for us to realize that the disruption of the Olympic cycle occurred also in the past, more than 100 years ago, after World War and the Spanish flu. It broke the 120 Antwerpen Olympic cycle. So, although many people think that COVID was the very first time for many things, it was not like this. History also can tell you things as well. Publications are not available yet, thus I'm going to share the design and some of the results. The objective was to longitudinally explore the impact of the disrupted Olympic cycle Tokyo 2020 on athletes' mental health, well-being, and perceived performance from a holistic point of view. Participants were 20 athletes in preparation for Tokyo 2020, 11 coaches, and 10 professionals of the entourage of the High Performance Center. We did a more than 2-year project with more than 4 interviews, some of them in lockdown, but I'm going to share only the interviews that we did just before Tokyo and just after Tokyo. Fantastic slide, you cannot see anything. So results shows that athletes transited through different mental health states on the road towards during and after Tokyo 2020. In the towards phase, athletes were adapting to the new reality and the protocols. The ones who were in qualification process were playing the last chances and trying to set short-term goals. And the ones that did not qualify were either focusing on the next cycle or accepting and retiring. During the games, the ones who went there shared with us mainly their fears of infection, and they defined these games as the CAF games. No public, no people, and it was like games that were not real games. Only the ones who were the first time that were going to a games were really enjoying them. And the ones who didn't make it, some of them, the ones who were focused on the next cycle, were supporting friends and follow competitions. And some others prefer not to follow Olympic Games at all and just planning the next steps. In the after, they all need to disconnect and to rest. We have been working also on the narratives of athletes that did not qualify for Tokyo 2020. But I'm not going to spoil Rocío's poster in Durham in 2 weeks. So I just recommend you to go in 2 weeks to Durham, to the qualitative conference in general, and to Rocío's poster in particular. And I will move to the final group, the unpredictable and holistic transitions. The top part of the human tower, the children that climb to the top. People think that we parents that allow children to climb there, we are crazy and we should be in jail. It could be possible. It's a more unbalanced and unstable part of the tower, where predictability is inexistent and a subtle movement can result in holistic consequences. The fourth block of transitions, unpredictable and holistic, such as the lockdown or that we all went through 2 years ago for the COVID pandemic, or the war, like the one sadly is going now in Ukraine, are transitions that could be considered of this type. I will only speak about lockdown briefly. This picture of the Ramblas, it's almost impossible to see ever because it's always a very, very crowded street in Barcelona. The lockdown offered us the opportunity to realize that not only elite or high-performance athletes go through transitions during their athletic career. So just after lockdown and redefining some of the objectives of our nationally funded research project under the lead of Joan Pons, we administered questionnaires online to more than 500 young Spanish players, mean age 16 years old, and mostly competing at regional and national levels. After a cluster analysis, we defined 3 groups. The low-impact group, the green line in the middle. The medium-impact group, the orange line, a bit outside the green line. And the high-impact group with higher scores in most of the dimensions: anxiety, depression, loss of confidence, social dysfunctioning, and so on. The low-impact group is the biggest. More than 50% of the sample was included in that group. The medium-impact group is again in the middle in terms of size and also affectation. But I want to call your attention to the high-impact group. It is the smallest in terms of size, but the more unbalanced in terms of gender, and the one in which the low-income group is higher. So, as it happens almost always, the impact of lockdown, at least in Spain, in terms of sporting practices, was higher in women with low income than more than double the levels of inactivity in comparison with the other groups. How am I of time? Okay. So let's go now to the concluding thoughts about successfulness. After trying to spread the classification of transitions based on their specificity and predictability, I would like to dedicate my concluding thoughts today to the concept of successfulness and how we use it in the career transition literature. Just keep in mind that less than 20% of young talented athletes will become elite athletes. And that all athletes, no matter their athletic level, will have to adapt to predictable and predictable level-specific and holistic transitions. So the preventive work on the promotion of career assistance programs and dual careers is a way of working on adaptability rather to work on successfulness. It's a way of including all the participants in youth sport, in youth competitive sport. I have another full conference on dual career, but don't worry, I'm not going to punish you so badly because I know that you all go to the final dinner. If you are interested, you can read some of the works that we have published recently in this line, led by Rob Morris, and together with other colleagues, European colleagues, we have published a taxonomy of dual career environments in European countries, in which we show that it is important to consider the environment in which the athlete developed their dual career and how do they adapt to the different environments. Together with Susana Reguela from the High Performance Center in Sant Cugat and Marina Mateos from the Australian Institute of Sport, we have tried to classify the different career assistance programs available, and there is a chapter included in the Routledge Encyclopedia. And this very week, and led by Jogel and Kegelars, we have published a scoping review on mental health in dual career. So adaptation to transitions means balancing the demands of sport and education and taking care of the athlete in a global perspective, taking care about adaptation more than success. I start my talk by sharing with you that I'm in Castellet, and I share with you the different parts of the tower. We can build some impressive human towers together, and I try to apply the same philosophy in our research group. But I can't lie you. Sometimes we fall. Sometimes we fail. Like this. It's quite impressive, actually. I don't want to finish this conference without sharing with you two of my many failures, as Iago mentioned before in the presentation, because I think that in some European cultures, such in Spain, we live failure in a very negative and destructive way, and we should try to change this approach. And for example, we presented a project in Erasmus Plus call, and we got this answer. I regret to inform you that your project has not been selected for EU co-funding. Your project received 74 points out of 100, and only applications with a score of 75 out of 100 are funded. We said, okay, we're going to improve it. We tried to improve it, and we submitted again, and we got a lower mark. So that's life. And also some years ago, I sent a paper and I received this feedback by the editor. I am struggling to see what this study adds to our existing knowledge. A lot of work is needed to improve the readability of the manuscript. So this is what I try to do. A lot of work in trying to improve the readability of our manuscripts and our works. And every time we fail, every time we fall, we try to reconstruct, and working harder and in collaboration with all the people that have built with me this line of research in sports psychology. Thanks to all of them. It's amazing to be able to work with you all, guys. Thank you very much. Ni puta idea de quan he trigat.
Thanks, Miquel, for this wonderful presentation. I know we're a bit late, but I think we have time for some questions now. One or two questions. Yeah. Is there Mike?
Thank you for a really well-structured presentation. You certainly scored over 75 on this occasion. And well done on not melting in this heat. I have a very practical question that may relate to other colleagues here. At my institution in West London, we run a large sports scholarship program. And we find that for many of those sports scholars, and among them maybe 10% will make it to the elite ranks, they disengage when it comes to their academic study. It's a huge issue for us. Do you have experience of this?
Yeah.
And what advice can you offer?
Yeah, that's a very important point. When we speak about dual career, when we speak about balancing sports and education, it means that both of them are very important, that not always they have to disengage from studies. So this is very much related with the philosophy of the program. What are the foundations of your program? And then, more important than that, how do you accomplish, or how you are very, very careful of accomplishing your philosophy of the program? Because in the everyday practice, sometimes it's difficult. So it's creating awareness that education is at least as important than sport. And sometimes you have to go more for one, and some other times you have to go more for the other. I don't know if I have answered your question. I can see that people want the final and the dinner.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really enjoyable. I guess my question follows on in relation to student athletes, so dual career athletes, who might make what we consider to be a normal transition from high school or school to university, but that it's a transition that they never expected to make because they were expecting to go into professional sport, for instance, without having gone to university in the first place. So I wonder whether we categorize that as a predictable and specific transition if the athletes themselves feel that it's not one that they were expecting. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I'm not hearing you. the audio here is not...
Yeah, so athletes who might make what we consider to be a predictable transition,
yeah.
So from school to university,
yeah.
But for them, it's an unexpected one because they were expecting to go into professional sport and not go to university at all. So how do we support and categorize that when we might consider it to be predictable, but for them it isn't?
Yeah, I think that the problem is that to create too high expectations on becoming a professional athlete, because we need narratives making clear that only between 10 and 20% will make it. So the problem is that they think that they are going to become professionals. So what we should work is on making clear that some of them will become professionals, but only a minority. The spots in professional sport are limited, and this is not going to... When we started working on junior to senior transition, we magically thought that we were going to be able to promote more people into professional sport, but this is not like this, because the spots there are constant. So what we can do is to navigate those transitions in a more healthy way. And that's the reason why we propose to change the word normative for predictive, more or less predictive, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Time now for the closing ceremony, but please, applause for Miquel Torregrossa. Thank you.
Gracias. Esta es épica.